Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Other Side of Yes podcast. I am your host, Jackie Onyate, and for today's episode, we will be interviewing a close friend of mine, Sierra Edmunds, and we will be discussing what her yes to Christ looked like following Christ in college and out of college once graduated. But before doing that, I thought it would be great to share my testimony and what my yes to Christ looked like just to give y'all a little bit more context of what we'd be touching base in during the interview. So I was born and raised in the church, as I'd like to say. We were at the church all the time, Sundays, Wednesdays, and any other day out of the week. I've never sought out a relationship with God on my own and never was interested in doing it. Until my freshman year of high school, I struggled with my mental health and I was having a really hard time with my family, lost all these friends, and I was just alone. And I developed social anxiety, was extremely anxious all the time, feared people, never wanted to talk to anyone. I was going home and it was just a toxic environment. And so I remember one day my aunt had invited me to church to a youth service. And I was like, okay, we'll go and see what this is about. But it was her way, as she told my mom, of getting me out of this funk. So went to church and I remember I walked in and for the first time it was like I could breathe. And during the sermon, the youth pastor is talking and he's hitting all these key points of what I'm going through. And it felt like somebody understood what I was going through and I wasn't alone in this battle with my mental health. And I remember leaving being like, okay, I've tried all these things. I did counseling. I've talked to all these people. I've tried my family. I've tried friends. And it wasn't that those things worked, but it was just like a band-aid. Nothing seemed to really help me get out of this really dark state that I was in. And so I thought, you know what? I've heard of this Jesus guy my entire life. I'm going to go for it and we're going to see what happens. Because at this point, I'm desperate. I don't know what else to do. So I start reading my Bible. I start getting connected to the church back home. I start getting in Bible study groups, and slowly I just started to see this freedom. And I no longer had anxiety. I was starting to serve in the kids ministry at that church and got connected to some really great people that poured into me and loved on me. And my relationship with my family started to get better. And high school, I kind of became stagnant also in just my relationship with God and, just being a teenager, doing whatever, but not really pursuing Him, not really changing anything, any habits or whatever. So it wasn't until a couple months ago that I just was not doing great. Um, yeah, just was not doing good. I felt that God had abandoned me. I thought that I was all alone, but really I had just stopped seeking him. And in stopping to seek him, I got into all the wrong things and I just searched and searched for this sort of satisfaction. I looked for it in alcohol, I looked for it in sex, I looked for it in friendships, I looked for it in my family and in my parents, I looked for it in school. And I thought all these things, if I could just find myself, find my identity in these things, then they would suffice and I would feel better and I wouldn't feel like I was alone all the time or do all these things. And it just didn't work. And I got to a point where it was really exhausting. It was exhausting. I can't do this anymore, God. I want you. So do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. And he did. And a lot of things changed. But I think in that changed, I got to encounter Christ in a way that I never have in my life. And it was no longer this idea or concept of works that, oh, if I'm good in school, then he'll love me. If I'm good in with my family, then he'll love me. If I'm reading my Bible every day, he'll love me. If I'm just this awesome and great person and never do any wrong, then he'll love me. But it was just always based on the fact that I was so imperfect that I couldn't understand that a perfect person like Jesus would love me. And so that was really hard. So when I got to this moment where I went before the Lord and I was like, I had nothing to give him. I didn't have the good grades. I didn't have the great relationships. I wasn't pure. I wasn't, you know, what I thought I needed to be or where I thought I needed to be for him to love me. And he showed up. And that changed my life. That changed everything for me. My idea of love changed. My idea of who I thought Jesus was changed. My relationship with God changed because for the first time I understood what come as you are meant. And it was so shocking to know that he's the one person that's never done any harm or made me feel some type of way. And so for me to do that, to do all these things that were outside of him and for him to still love me, that changed my life. And so that's brought me to here. And that's brought me to obviously why I've created this podcast. I think there's a lot of things that we can search for. And I've done the search and I did it my entire life. And I found it and I found it in him. And it's like nothing I've ever experienced. And so being able to experience him in this way has gotten me the opportunity to connect with a lot of great people like Sierra, who I'll be interviewing today. And she's gotten to see me go from the girl who was searching for love and trying to see what it looked like to be loved by God and to really understand that to be here now where I've gotten it and it's clicked and my life has changed and she can see the fruit of it. And so she's been a really great friend and she's been here for a lot of the growing that I've done. And so I thought it'd be great to interview her just to see where her journey began with her relationship with Christ, how we got connected, and what that looked like for her in college, as now I'm a college student. And so just getting insight from her and wisdom for her has always been great because there's so much that she's gone through that now that she's out of college and she pursues Christ, it's just getting to see her life has really been a great influence. So I'm excited for you guys to meet Sierra and excited for this interview. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I have Miss Sierra Edmunds. You can
Hey
wait.
guys.
Hey guys. Okay, so first, I guess we'll go ahead and jump straight into the interview. But I want Sierra, if you can, to introduce yourself, where you went to school, major, professional life, all the things Sierra, sort of basically what led you here to San Antonio.
Yeah, I like Jackie said, my name's Sierra Edmunds. I am 26. I am a speech language pathologist.
Nice. Okay, so I think it was important for us to kind of explain how we got connected.
hmm
So, why I'm interviewing you for this podcast, but I think first we'll get into how did you get connected to Luminous Church before I get into how we got connected as friends?
Had been praying since March that I would find a church home, that I'd find community, um, and just ways to grow in my faith. And so graduate in May of 2022. Fast forward, I moved to San Antonio in July of 2022. And before that, I had Googled like a list of diverse churches in San Antonio, and a couple popped up. Um, and I tried one church one Sunday. It wasn't a good fit for me. And then my third week in San Antonio, I tried a second church, which happened to be Luminous. And I've been here almost 2.5 years later.
Okay, yeah, nice. So Luminous, okay, I'll give my backstory now of how I got plugged in, but I am from Midland, Texas. And so there is a home church there called Mid Cities, and Luminous is the sister church. So people from Midland moved to San Antonio to plant that church there. And so that's how I got connected. I was getting my associates back home at a community college and then transferred to San Antonio to attend UTSA to get my bachelor's. And in doing that, I got connected to Luminous, which essentially got me connected to Sierra. But there's a campus organization at UTSA called Every Nation Campus, and it's a faith-based campus ministry. But that's what I'm connected into now. And so they were doing like a Valentine's like series of dating and relationships, and we did a panel and Sierra was on the panel. She was talking and I remember she at the time I was still kind of like getting into my faith and trying to seek like who Christ was. And I remember Sierra was just like talking, she got emotional about like, what Jesus meant to her. And I remember just being like, oh my gosh, like I need to talk to this girl because she has what I want, and I want to feel the same thing that she has, and I want to know what that feeling is like to really like pursue Christ. And so then we started talking, and that's when we started getting connected and like growing. So yeah, that was in 2022. It's crazy 2 years. What a 2 year difference
Yeah.
of like from where we were to where we are now. So now that we've kind of like discussed like how we got connected and all these things, I thought it'd be a perfect transition to go into your testimony. So how obviously you encountered Christ, and kind of what that did for you and how that changed like your life after that.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, I felt myself getting emotional when you were sharing that memory because
Yeah.
I think even like looking back, we've both grown so much since
Yeah.
then. So it's just cool to remember that connection. But I my testimony, I grew up a Christian. I was always in church, would go to church on Sundays and things like that. Like I always knew about God. My parents would tell if there's something wrong, pray. Like I definitely knew about prayer. Um, like I said, I knew of God. I don't know that we had like a relationship. So I
Mhm.
think growing up, it just was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go to church on Sunday. I think I felt that guilt, like guilty if I didn't go on Sunday. Um I felt like I had to read my Bible because I had to. Um I don't think any part of my life was surrendered to the Lord, or there was no sort of obedience. It just was like I have to because everyone else is doing it, and if I
Yeah.
don't, I'm bad. It's going into college, I I think that's the first time that I realized like, man, I don't know who I am. Like I grew
Mhm.
up an athlete, like I said. Um, Not that this means anything, but I was voted like most athletic in high school. I was a good student. Um, nothing quote unquote like, oh, I have everything going for me. And so I get to college, I'm not playing soccer anymore. I start struggling in school. Um, Financially, things were hard for my family, and they always were, but I think going to Baylor where um that was very evident, like that I my life looked a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so I think getting to college, um I started really experiencing like loneliness for the first time. And I always knew that like I worried about things, but I think it was the first time that like I felt anxiety
Yeah.
and extended sadness of like, oh, I know that this isn't right, but I don't know how to get out of it. And so I think in college I have a huge desire to get married and have kids. I still have that desire. But in college, that took priority over everything. Well, if I just get the guy, I'll be happy. If I just am in a relationship, he'll be my best friend. If I'm just in a relationship, he'll fill that void that I have. Attention from guys and X, Y, and Z, and none of that filled me. And so, like I mentioned too, I was struggling academically. And I'm like, well, if I just get the grade, like I'll feel
Yeah.
better. And so I think one thing about Baylor, though, that was nice is that that spiritual component is built in if you want it. And so every dorm has a chaplain. I ended up becoming an RA at Baylor. Baylor calls them community leaders, but it's the same as a resident assistant at other colleges. And, every staff meeting we do Bible studies and there's prayer. And so I think in college, like I really started, that's when I first started realizing like, oh, I want Jesus. Like
Yeah.
That's what's going to anchor me, but still I didn't know how to get it.
Yeah.
And so, but I was like, oh, I need, like, I always had the desire to know the Lord. I just had no, like, discipleship, no one teaching me like the ways. And I had no sort of like, I knew I wanted Jesus, but he still wasn't everything for me.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of, I had that mentality in college and grad school. I would say I'm growing more like, okay, I know that this is not good, but like I said, Jesus is still not enough, which is sad
Yeah.
to say, but that's just the reality. And so I finished grad school and I'm still unhappy. Like at this time, I have 2 degrees, I have a job lined up, an apartment, like things are quote unquote like going well, but I'm still not happy. And I feel
Hmm.
like I've hit lows before, but I think I just hit another low of like, okay, my desire for marriage still is outweighing my desire for the Lord. My desire for material things, all these things are outweighing my desire for the Lord, and that's not okay. Like
Yeah.
I had a wake up call with myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I realized it's Jesus or nothing.
Yeah.
And I remember the Lord, he asked me to do 2 things 2 years, 2.5 years ago. He asked me to be obedient to him and to be patient. And I have been, that's what I've been trying to do 2 years later. And so
Yeah.
just those 2 years, like I look back on where I was and I'm like, oh, like I can say like now he's Lord of my life. Not that I don't struggle or that everything's perfect because they're not, but it's like I know where I was and I know where I am now and like I see Jesus clearly. And
Yeah.
so I was once like isolated and alone and now I have peace. And I just know how loved and cared for I am.
Yeah. That's good. So I guess I think another question like that we could touch base on is like, what does obedience look like? Obviously, for people listening who aren't followers of Christ or who don't necessarily know the terminology, like, could you be able to explain like what does it look like for you to be obedient to Christ, just by your own like personal example?
Yeah. I mean, I think even like I said, I want to be married and I
Hmm.
want kids. And I think I was looking for other avenues to get that. And I think at the time, 2 years ago, I wanted to like get on a dating app. And I'm not saying that dating apps are bad, trying to control everything. But what we know as Christians is if we truly believe that Jesus died on the cross for us and that he's our Lord and Savior, um, like we know that he's in control. And so I think for me, obedience to him looked like following his word. So following what it says in the Bible, not trying to do things my own way,
Yeah.
not thinking that I can control everything because I'm not in control. Um, I think even obedience to, for me, is just like that daily surrender of like, Lord, I give you this, take it and have your way.
Yes, to Christ. Obviously, when it comes from the transition from like being in college to now managing your time and as an adult and like being in professional like work field, would you say like what tips do you have or advice do you have like in that transition or even just being a college student pursuing
Yeah.
Christ and saying yes?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the yes to Christ is hard now because, like I said, I know that it's an all or nothing thing. And I've tasted, like, I know how good he is. Like, I don't want anything else.
Hmm.
So I think that life still gets in the way sometimes. And I get caught up in the busyness of work and just life,
Yeah.
where I don't make him a priority sometimes. Yes. But I think now I have it's always in the back of my head. And now it's not like I have to do this. It's like, oh, I can't wait to spend time with you and incorporate you, like just spend my day with you. Because that's, I mean,
Yeah.
as Christians too, like Jesus, he should be in every little thing, every little decision. And
Yeah.
I think just we are human. There are temptations and worldly things. I get distracted. And so, but I think it's just, God, I want you. I choose you. It's that constant going back to him, emotional again, because it, like, I know where I was. Like, I remember where I was in college. I remember those low moments and only feeling like things were dark. And to be out on the other side of things, it's like, man, I just know how good um Jesus is. And like when things get hard, because life happens, things, bad things happen, not fun things happen, but it's now I see his light. Like I can
Mhm.
see just so clear, and it just gives me hope. It's like no matter what I go through, like he is my foundation because things changes everything. Like I don't want a temporary peace. Like I want something that's everlasting. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's only come from a relationship with the Lord, but it's something that I want. I know that it's something that I need. It, I couldn't do my job or function without Jesus, and not that I don't fall short or like I said earlier get distracted or things get busy, but he's just like I said the light in the darkness. And I'm just thankful to see that now, to see him, because I didn't always. And it's not fun feeling like you're isolated and alone and believing the lies of the enemy. But I think the yes is worth it, of just knowing that you have a friend, a provider, um, just someone who cares, who's good and faithful. Like we have all of that in Jesus. And yeah, I want that. That's worth it.
Yeah. Wow. That was so good. That was so well put. But yes, so thank you, Sierra, for being my first interviewee amidst. So I hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Sierra and were able to get some insight into what it looks like to say yes to Christ as a college student and what it looks like to continue following Christ after college and entering into adulthood and into the work field of your desires and all these things. I think one thing from that interview, or just from the whole concept of this podcast that I wanted to create, is that I think for a long time I didn't think that I was enough or enough. Like I need to do all these great things to finally be enough, then to be worthy, then to get the recognition, then for God to love me. Because if these people that I've grown up with or was raised with or whatever can't express it in such a way that I think that I need it, then how can God do that for me? And that was really hard growing up, trying to separate people from God. And I think just to recount over my life and where I'm at now, for the first time, once I really encountered Christ and really started to pursue and follow him, for the first time, I was enough. And it wasn't because of anything I did. It wasn't because I'm this great person and I'm not flawed. It wasn't because of any of that. It was because of everything that he had already done on the cross by dying for my sins. And I think understanding that and recognizing his love for me, that he would love me so much, that he would love you so much, that he would get on a cross and die for you because he wants a relationship with you. And once that clicked in my mind, like I said again in the beginning, it changed everything for me. It changed my idea of who I thought God was and who what I thought following Jesus was like. And so I hope that this interview provided insight. I hope that you're able to take something from it, whether you're a believer or not a believer, whether you're trying to decide where you're at. I think there's a lot that can be discussed and dove into, just on the context of what it looks like to say yes to Christ. But I think just like Sierra said in her interview, it's worth it. It it is so worth it. I don't know where I would be or what my life would look like if Jesus hadn't saved me out of what I was drowning in. And so to be on the other side, to have said yes, and to now be living in what it looks like to say yes, to now be on this side where life isn't any easier, but I have him to go through it with me. It's so much greater and so much better than what it was before. Um, So, yeah, I hope that y'all enjoyed this episode and had fun watching it. And I'm excited for the next episodes and for the other guests that we'll continue to have, or even for their solo interviews, of just being able to come and sit and be honest and be real about the struggles of life, but also being able just to relate that we don't have to do it alone. So, thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Again, I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I hope y'all have a blessed day or evening or whatever time you are watching this episode. And thank you guys again. Bye.